Hey everyone, and welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into a story that honestly feels like it was ripped right out of a Hollywood spy thriller, but it's actually rooted in very real documented events. We're looking at 11 missing scientists. Is it a coincidence or a pattern? We are going to examine a highly unusual sequence of events involving some of the brightest minds in the country. Now, just to be clear right off the bat, our goal today isn't to validate some wild theory, and it's not to debunk one either. We're just here to look really closely at the data and the timeline. We're going to break down the facts, examine the official responses, and figure out exactly why this particular sequence of events is raising so many eyebrows. So get comfortable, and let's unravel this central mystery together. All right, let's get straight into the core anomaly here. 11. That is the exact number of highly placed scientists and government-linked researchers who have recently either vanished without a trace or turned up dead under a really wide variety of circumstances. Now, a number like that, just in isolation, it might seem like a tragic statistic, but we really need to look closer at this. We have to ask questions and see if there's any kind of thread tying these 11 individuals together. Because it's the context of time that makes this whole thing truly fascinating. 24 months. All 11 of these cases happen within a surprisingly brief 2-year window. If you do the math, that breaks down to about one incident every 2 to 2.5 months. And this is a super compelling point because, think about it, we live in a totally electronic age. It is incredibly difficult for an adult to just disappear. I mean, we all leave electronic footprints all over the place, right? Credit cards, ATMs, facial recognition cameras, license plate readers. Going completely off the grid is almost impossible nowadays. And sure, while about 600,000 people go missing every year, almost all of them are eventually found or accounted for. Yet in this super tight 24-month window, we have a highly concentrated cluster of unresolved cases. So the absolutely crucial point here is understanding exactly who these people were. They weren't just everyday professionals. The big common thread among all 11 individuals is their highly sensitive professional backgrounds. We're talking about folks tied to some of the absolute most sensitive work in the United States government. Nuclear research, aerospace engineering, advanced technology, and space programs. These are areas that are incredibly active and highly classified. These individuals held knowledge that, frankly, would be a massive prize for anyone wanting to do the country harm. To really wrap our heads around the scale of this data, let's group the cases together, starting with the 5 researchers who just seemingly vanished into thin air. You've got William McCasslin, former head of an Air Force research lab overseeing advanced weapons. He leaves his personal items behind after reportedly dealing with some unusual mental fog. Then there's Monica Reza, linked to NASA materials research, who completely vanishes while out hiking in California. Melissa Casillas and Anthony Chavez, both from the heavily guarded Los Alamos National Lab, they just disappear without a trace. Chavez even left his wallet, keys, and phone behind, and Stephen Garcia, who was tied to a national security campus for nuclear systems, literally walks out of his front door on foot and is never seen again. Now, the circumstances shift pretty drastically when we look at the second cluster of scientists. These are the ones who were found deceased. These cases highlight the really varying and sometimes violently sudden nature of their deaths. Nuno Lorio, a nuclear fusion scientist, and Carl Grillmer, a NASA-affiliated astrophysicist, were both shot and killed. Now, suspects have been identified in those specific cases, but it is still part of the timeline. Others like Jason Thomas, Frank Maywald, and Michael Hicks died under either natural causes or with very limited public details, like Jason Thomas being found dead in a lake. And then there's the incredibly unsettling case of Amy Eskridge, an anti-gravity researcher whose death was ruled a suicide. Eskridge's story brings a very real, very chilling human element to all these data points. Before her death, she had publicly stated that she was facing serious threats over her work. Her exact words were, "Like we discovered anti-gravity and our lives went to shit and people started sabotaging us, and it's a harassment threat." When you take a raw quote like that and place it right next to a cluster of missing or dead scientists, well, you instantly start to understand why these difficult questions are being asked in the first place. Now, there's a really fascinating dynamic going on with how this information is actually reaching the public. While legacy media has largely kind of dragged its feet or looked the other way on this pattern, this isn't just some fringe internet rumor. Fox's Peter Doocy literally stood up in the White House briefing room on camera and directly asked the administration about these missing or dead American scientists who had access to classified nuclear and aerospace material. It was brought up entirely in the open, where every single other correspondent in the room could hear the question. And the response to that briefing room question is absolutely key here, because it proves this mystery has reached the highest levels of government. Right after that question, President Biden himself weighed in, stating he had, quote, just left the meeting on that subject. Caroline Leavitt followed up too, confirming that the White House is actively working with the FBI to review the cases to identify any potential commonalities. That means they're officially looking for a pattern. We also have lawmakers like Representative Eric Burleson going on the record to say the whole thing feels too coincidental to ignore. And, to be fair to the media landscape, CBS News did step up and publish a prominent headline on the deaths and disappearances at these secretive government laboratories. So with all these official acknowledgments from the very top, why is the knee-jerk instinct for so many people to just label this a wild, kooky conspiracy theory? Well, before we just completely dismiss it, history actually tells us to pause and wait for the facts. We really shouldn't immediately wave off uncomfortable patterns just because they sound a little crazy at first glance. Just look at the historical record for a second. Events that initially sounded exactly like bizarre spy movies have often turned out to be totally real. In the 1970s, the Watergate break-in was completely dismissed at first as this crazy conspiracy theory cooked up by partisans. Fast forward, and it was proven true, went all the way to the president and led to Nixon resigning. Or jump back to 1953 with the CIA's MK-Ultra program. The idea that the government was secretly experimenting with LSD for mind control, that sounded completely unbelievable. Yet, it was eventually uncovered as absolute documented fact. Or jump closer to today, to 2013. If you walked around claiming the NSA was indiscriminately surveilling citizens and world leaders, people called you paranoid. That is, until Edward Snowden revealed that the mass data collection was entirely real. The absolutely crucial point here is how the term conspiracy theory actually gets weaponized. Yes, by strict definition, a conspiracy theory is a hypothesis about covert influential organizations. But in practice, this label is sometimes used to basically dismiss legitimate questions before they can even be properly investigated. Just because something has that conspiracy vibe doesn't mean the public suddenly loses their right to demand the facts. We are absolutely entitled to ask questions when the data presents a clear pattern, especially when it involves highly sensitive national security personnel. Which brings us to our core takeaway from all of this. The goal here isn't necessarily to prove some massive, orchestrated cinematic plot. No, the goal is the absolute necessity of transparency. There's a profound danger in just ignoring patterns, even if the ultimate answer eventually turns out to be nothing more than a string of incredibly tragic, totally unrelated coincidences. You don't ignore patterns, and you definitely don't stop asking questions just because the answers might be uncomfortable to deal with. So I want to leave you with this final, provocative thought today. Just look back at the facts we've covered. 11 highly placed scientific and aerospace minds, a super concentrated 24-month window, and the very highest levels of the U.S. government actively looking for commonalities. Are there just enough unanswered questions here to make us start connecting the dots? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep asking those questions, keep looking closely at the data, and keep learning. Catch you next time.